much, Colin. I think we should give Colin some praise. It's just amazing what the man comes up with. Good morning. My name is Lynn Dodd, and I have the honor of leading you in worship today, this first Sunday of Advent. First, I'm going to read some announcements. So yesterday, there was a craft and bake sale held here in the fellowship hall, and it went very well, even with restrictions on the number of people in the room at one time. They sold out most of the baking, the lunch went over well, and any leftover mitts, hats, and scarves are all being donated to the Out of the Cold program in Collingwood. The proceeds of the sale are going towards the Days for Girls program, which, for those who may not know, makes and distributes reusable feminine hygiene kits to girls and women who need them, both here at home and in other countries. This week, the Simcoe Muskoka Health Unit regulations for preventing COVID outbreaks were bumped up again due to increases in cases. And we were pretty compliant. We didn't have to update anything. The spaces in Emmanuel fall into 3 different categories, and this is really confusing. So our sanctuary and upper church spaces are faith-based. The downstairs fellowship hall and adjoining rooms are gathering spaces, and the Montessori rooms are educational spaces. So all 3 have different requirements and regulations, and like I said, they've all been implemented. Recently, a letter was mailed out to everyone associated with the manual from Reverend Tim Rayburn Gibson, our interim moderator. On behalf of Session, we're asking for your opinions on how to adapt to changing conditions in our life, in our church, and our church life. You have the option of replying in confidence on email or by return stamped envelope. Today, we welcome our speaker, John Millar, founder and director of Water First. John lives just down the road in Creemore, and Water First has its offices there as well. Many of you will remember when John was here in the past, leading our youth group in some water education practices, and then he also spoke to the adults. We didn't get a chance to practice with all the neat gadgets that he had. We raised some money for Water First then. This year, with all the tragedies and now the focus on healing and reconciling with Indigenous peoples, we as Session decided that one practical way we could show our support was by contributing to enhancing water solutions that have been accomplished and are still happening in so many communities, with the assistance of the incredible staff and supporters at Water First. And lastly, a miracle on 124th Street, known to the locals as Highway 124. Placed the curves and hills near Devil's Glen. I was told this story this week and have permission to share it with you all. Evelyn Minduik said she and her son Randy were heading to Collingwood a few days ago when the weather turned nasty and they were trying to turn out onto the road. Blowing snow, poor visibility, heavy traffic, especially big trucks coming from both directions without any let-up. They finally got onto 124 and carried on. Suddenly they hit an icy patch and lost control. 1 minute she was sure they were going to go over the cliff on one side, then the car spun around and headed towards the other cliff. Evelyn said she was sure they were going to die, but she did not feel panic, only a deep peace. And then the car suddenly just righted itself into the proper lane, continuing straight down the road. And Randy couldn't explain that either. But Evelyn said the most amazing thing was that while that was happening, there were no cars or trucks anywhere near them, either to be in the way or even to see them if they had gone over the cliff. And then once they got driving again further down the road, the traffic started all up again. Do you believe in miracles? I sure do. Thank you, God. And we're now going to watch a video for Advent and then light the candle. We light the candle of hope. Thank you, Lord, for the hope in your Son, Jesus. Our first two hymns are Here I Am to Worship, and then a tune that you will recognize, but with new lyrics. These are penned by Carolyn Gillette, and it's called God of Love, We've Known Division. This song was originally written for Americans after the election, but it speaks clearly to us as Canadians, too, with all the events of the past 2 years. And wow, God does work in mysterious ways, as both Colin and I found the lyrics for this at about the same time on the same day, and we weren't even trying to look for that one particularly. So, please stand if you wish to. Thank you, Colin. You may be seated. Let us pray. God, it is so good to be here together once again, in person or online. From places deeply rooted, we gather to light our Advent candles. From places yet undiscovered, we gather to sing our Advent songs. From places tangled with disappointment and misunderstanding, we gather to share our Advent prayers. In this Advent season, we want you, O God. We wait on you for the light of the world to come. You come to all people, to the have-nots and the haves, to those who struggle, those who have found success, to those who are lost, those who have found their way. You come to those who feel You come to those who feel oppressed, Lord, and exploited, to the despised and rejected, to those who have more than what they need and can and should help others still in need. Light of the world, come not as a person of power, but in love and compassion. Come to the outcast, like the shepherds in the fields, like the homeless in our streets. Come to foreigners, like magi watching from afar, like new immigrants and refugees, and those who have lived here for generations but still don't feel like they belong. Come to the poor and rich, old and young, female and male, all the colors and body shapes of the world, for you created us all in your image before the world was begun. We wait with all the peoples of the earth. Light of the world, we welcome your coming. Hear our words and hearts united as we pray together the words that Jesus taught. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us away from temptation, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Today, instead of reading from Scripture, I am going to read from Living Faith. This is a Presbyterian document, a statement of Christian belief, and it is taken exactly from Scripture. And if you feel like speaking aloud with me, you can. It looks like, are there words for the screen or no? Okay, sorry. Come, Lord Jesus. May the God of hope fill us with joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit we abound in hope. Life in the age to come is pictured in the Bible in different ways: an eternal kingdom, a new heaven and earth, a marriage feast, an unending day, the Father's house, and the joy of God's presence. God will triumph over all opposition and everything that disrupts creation. God in Christ. From Israel came the Messiah. In Jesus of Nazareth, God kept the promise of salvation. We understand his coming in the light of the Old Testament. Born of the seed of David, he lived a Jew among Jews. Child of an Israelite woman, he fulfilled God's promise that Israel would be a light to the nations. In Christ God came to dispel the world's darkness. God became man and dwelt among us. In silence we ponder. In awe we confess this amazing truth. Conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, the eternal Son of God humbled himself to be one with us. To Israel and to the world came God in Christ. To call Jesus Christ the Son of God is to say that he is God of light, God of God, light of light, begotten, not made. To see Jesus is to see God incarnate. To know the Son is to know the Father. May God bless these words inspired by his holy word. Colin will now lead us as we sing Water Flowing from the Mountain, and then John will come up and give us his presentation. Oh, sorry, you're not singing.
Jump right in?
Yes, you may.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure being back here. It's been about 8 years since I stood here last and told you a little bit about the organization that I run. And, I want to start with a big thanks to George and Lynn Dodd for your interest and enthusiasm in the work that Water First is doing. For your support and for inviting me back. It's a real pleasure, again, being here. In the past 8 years, there has been a ton of change at this organization. When I was here last, we were called Tin Roof Global, for one thing, and we're now called Water First. I really hope there can be, some discussion if there's interest in that, because I want to share that it's through these kinds of and moments that we actually found ourselves considering whether we should be pivoting from our work in overseas to our work with Indigenous communities in Canada. And I've said this a number of times that it was like after and during conversations in churches, in Rotary clubs and so on, where I started being asked more and more about why we're going so far abroad to find water challenges to solve, when in fact there's so many water challenges right here in Canada in Indigenous communities that very sadly don't have a lot of access, sufficient access to clean drinking water. There's a big gap there, of course, and I think we've all heard a lot about that over the last few years. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. If I could have the next slide, Bob, please. So first of all, our mission is addressing local water challenges in Indigenous communities through education and meaningful collaboration. So that's really the crux of things. It's education and training. We're not in an Indigenous community, fixing a water treatment plant, pulling out a faulty pump or filtration device or something, and That's not us at all. We focus exclusively with education and training and supporting the existing efforts in Indigenous communities to manage resources locally with local skills and the certifications and so on required to do that. Next slide, please. We spent a lot of time years ago. We were just really trying to get an understanding of how do we articulate, how do we organize our thoughts around how we do what we do. We kept being told that what we're doing is fairly unique, and so we came up with what we refer to as our strands of success, which are trust building, meaningful partnerships, and lasting results. So trust building, we acknowledge that, of course, I'm the executive director of the organization. I am not Indigenous. We recognize that we are not an Indigenous-led organization. Sadly, there's been a deplorable history between our peoples over the many, many years that we've been together. And there's a lot of trust to build. There's been a lot of trust broken over a very long period of time, and we acknowledge where we're coming from, what we bring to the table, just by showing up, right? So building trust and being mindful of that along the way is really critical. Meaningful partnerships. Again, it's not kind of us coming in and fixing something. We work in a field that's referred to as community development. And done well, that's actually a two-way street. Gone are the days, there has been a model for a long time of like this hole that an expert comes along and fills on behalf of whomever the recipient of that program. It's not a very good way of doing things. It certainly doesn't honor the existing talents and capacities and knowledge that are there. And we actually need to learn from one another in order to do what we're doing well. And so the meaningful partnerships is, very much a commitment to unpacking together how we do things and collaborating. We feel like we're strong in water science, we're strong in education and training, but very few of us have grown up in a reserve. And so we need to listen very carefully when we're visiting Indigenous communities in order to partner meaningfully. And lasting results, it's really, the beauty of education and training. A family member of mine, I'm sure this phrase is fairly common, but said get a good education, it's easy to carry, and no one can take it away from you. The beauty of education and training is that it's, not only those things, but it builds upon itself. It can really sort of take hold in an individual, in a community, and done well, individuals can really just take a ball and run with it. And you're not expected to continue to run that program in perpetuity forever. You can help to support a young individual who can then take the ball and run with it for many years to come. So it's a commitment to those three things. Next slide, please, Bob. So as I mentioned, we got started, we were actually working in Uganda. We were bringing water resources, these giant rain barrels, to schools in rural Uganda. In 2016, we changed our name from Tin Roof Global to Water First and started exclusively working with Indigenous Canada. There's wonderful work happening abroad. May it continue. There's a little piece of my heart still in Uganda where we started working. But when I recognized that there's not enough work happening with Canadian civil society, which is like NGOs and charities and so on, engaging with Indigenous communities in Canada, that space is sadly very uncrowded. I felt a bit ashamed about that. And so we recognize we're a small organization. We can't do a great job of both. We can't do an amazing job of working abroad and an amazing job of working with Indigenous communities here. And so we decided to commit to working with Indigenous communities exclusively, and we started that in 2016. Next slide, please. This is a big part of the work, so I'll read this out. I know it can be difficult to see the writing here. 13.5% of First Nations communities in Canada are under a boil water advisory. You think of that, if 13, 14 out of 100 communities in Canada were under a boil water advisory, we'd have a national crisis. If it's Indigenous communities, it seems to be a bit more permissible, which is certainly not the way it should be. There's dramatic overrepresentation here in Ontario. This number needs to be updated. It's come down since, but you know, the 40% of First Nations communities are under a boil water advisory in Ontario. So, you know, for whatever reason, it's complex. Indigenous communities in Ontario are very much overrepresented here, and that's something that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. So our three main our programming. We work in drinking water, environmental water, and school programs with youth education. I'll tell you a little bit about those three programs now. And the next slide, please. For drinking water in particular, we tend to work at a tribal council level, and so that's engaging, you know, you think of a county here, Simcoe County, and a whole bunch of towns come together under Simcoe County. A tribal council is a number of different First Nations communities that come together under a tribal council umbrella. So we tend to work with tribal councils with this program. You have economies of scale. There's just, why run a classroom with 2 seats when you could run a classroom with 20? So we approach it that way, and the young Indigenous adults that we work with, they come together for centralized trainings in a classroom. We tackle you know, a specific curriculum for the course of a week, and then they go back and work out of their home communities' water treatment plants. It does that over the course of 15 months. It's a 15-month paid internship. They're working full-time for those 15 months, and they're obtaining entry-level certifications. You need to pass an operator in training exam. We also help support water quality analyst certifications and entry-level courses, all these things that you need to go and get if you're going to, you know, work in a water treatment plant. So that's really the nature of it. On the next slide, I believe there's a video, and if you wouldn't mind queuing that up, Bob, this will tell us a little bit about, a bit more about the Drinking Water Internship Program. And I think if you, on your end, if you hover over it, there's a link that comes up. And if it's not working for whatever reason, I can talk about it. I'll share a bit more about it if you know what. Pardon me? It's not going to play? Okay, that's fine. I'll tell you about Naomi, who's standing right there. She's from Wikwemikong unceded territory up on Manitoulin Island. And she was a participant in one of the very first she was a real go-getter. It still is. She passed, you know, a lot of the exams ahead of her peers. Super bright, really determined to carve out a space for herself in the water field. We ran our pilot in partnership with 7 First Nations on Manitoulin Island. Really just with more questions than answers about how do we address this together, and that's what I was referring to earlier about, you know, a meaningful partnership to come together and say, okay, we have some capacities around education and water science, and how do we put those into play in a way that makes sense for the community? So we developed this program together. As I mentioned, it is 15 months long. We're now identifying our 4th tribal council. To date, we have worked with 3 tribal councils. The program has seen 35 young Indigenous adults in 25 different First Nations pass their operator and training exams, and together they've put in well over 50,000 hours of training in their local water treatment plants. You know, the whole idea is to support local management of resources, of water resources. Unfortunately, you know, there's too many water plants where there aren't enough operators. The existing operators are doing a great job with the resources that they have at hand, but a lot of the communities we engage with and the ones that we partner with recognize that it would be very welcome to see more young Indigenous adults entering into the field. So we're really helping the communities to then identify who those young people are, and then we're supporting them through those classroom sessions that I mentioned, but also, you know, through one-on-one tutorials. And so we will, if the individuals are willing to roll up their sleeves and have a crack at an exam, often not everyone passes the first time, but if they're willing to try again, then so are we. And we have our trainers literally elbow to elbow with the young Indigenous individuals to have a crack at another exam. So that's the main spirit of it with the drinking water realm, and really to support young Indigenous adults entering into that field. In water plants where there's only one person who's running the plant, a lot of the time, if that's the case, that individual hasn't left their community for more than 24 hours in the past year or two, because they can't leave the water plant unattended. There's only one operator. It's also for communities where they can look around and understand, like, okay, a lot of our operators are in their 50s and 60s. We might not have a problem now, but we might have a challenge 5-10 years from now. And so it's that kind of context. There's also some communities that have no operators, and there's outside individuals who come in and run the plant on behalf of the community. And of course, I think we'd all agree that's not a very sustainable way. It's not a very independent position for some of those communities to operate in. And anyway, so that's the main spirit of what we're doing with our drinking water program. If I could have the next slide, Bob, please. Our environmental program it actually predates our drinking water. We've been working with the environmental program ever since we started working with Indigenous communities, which was about, actually, when I was here last, around 2012, 2013, is when we started working with Indigenous communities. We have restoration projects, so there's environmental projects like identifying and expanding a spawning shoal where fish will come and spawn and lay their eggs, and sometimes those for a variety of reasons. But there's also baseline water quality studies, so getting an understanding of what is the water quality like today. And then you can run that same testing 5-10 years from now and compare it to today's results and get a sense of whether the water quality is changing. Is it changing for the better? Is it staying the same, or is it changing for the worse? We also do environmental contaminant studies as well, where we're trying to identify something like mercury, which is a neurotoxin that can literally fall from the sky from effluent that ends up in our atmosphere, and it pollutes lakes. It gets into fish. People eat those fish, of course, and it can really pose a hazard to human health that way as well. So yeah, the environmental programs, they've been running for a while. What they have in common with our drinking water projects is that we hire and train locally. We're not coming in, again, and conducting the work ourselves. We are hiring and training young Indigenous adults and helping in a hands-on environment like the water plant, but this time it's a local stream, a lake, or a river. And we're conducting the work together. We're providing some oversight and some expertise, but ultimately we are just helping to support the young Indigenous adults, get the support, get the experience, and the trainings along the way. So it's really critical. But that project, the environmental project, has really seen a lot of expansion around the country. So we got started in Ontario, of course, with all of our projects. And then we started working in Quebec, and then we started working up in Labrador with our environmental projects as well. If I could have the next slide, please, Bob. This is another link to a video. I'm unsure of whether or not that is going to go. No? Okay. So again, as I said, we're doing work in a variety of different areas. Right now, and actually it was on Thursday that we heard from really great individuals. Lynn and George were able to see that online. It was actually something that we started doing with COVID, but then of course we actually found that the online environment was very strong, and so we're likely be doing this for many years to come, despite COVID being with us or not. And we heard from a couple of young Indigenous adults who we've worked with. One was way up in Labrador, and another was in Quebec. The environmental projects, again, it's the same kind of spirit to them, where through hiring and training locally, you then, that lasting results piece that I was talking about, you have these wonderful young Indigenous adults who then, with a little bit of experience, it was Casey who was saying on Thursday that just this one little project that she worked on, I think she was working sort of part-time with First Nation at the time, and then it became a full-time job, and then it spawned into another 3, 4, 5 different projects, all from one little project where we started working together. And that's the kind of snowballing thing that education and training can bring, and it helps in the environmental space too. So with Casey at Quebecois First Nation in Quebec, it was an environmental project where we were looking at spawning shoals in particular. And anyways, it means the world to the communities, to some communities in particular, to focus on the local fishery and some of the challenges that are happening there. If I could have the next slide, please, Bob. So our school water programs, the other 2 programs I mentioned, drinking water and environmental, they focus on kind of adults today, existing young Indigenous adults. Often we're asked by leadership in Indigenous communities, well, it's great that we're working with today's adults, but what about the next generation? And so we've been working with schools in virtually every First Nation where we have a project, whether that's a drinking water project or environmental water project, and sometimes it's a school project, where we should be engaging the next generation just as much as we are engaging with the existing generation of young adults. And so we'll bring some of those trainees into the classroom, and they're working with our educators, with our trainers and educators, elbow to elbow again. And it's a really cool way to go about doing that. There's some projects that are kind of longer term. There are some that are shorter term. The longer ones where we're coming back multiple times throughout an engagement with a community. That's really helpful because a lot of communities in the far north in particular, they see, folks like me coming from the outside, and sometimes you only go once. And it's not the best way to build relationships and build trust with your Indigenous community partners when you're a bit more of a, kind of a flash in the pan. And so we try to avoid that where we can by having lasting relationships with our community partners. And it extends to the school programs as well, where we can come back and just make sure that we have a more in-depth relationship with those individuals. So that's been super helpful. It's the same kind of thing as you can see here in the photo. And if I could have the next slide, Bob, I think, yeah, there's another photo where it's hands-on, right? So there's one thing, as we're doing now, to kind of, listen to a talking head, but to actually get your hands involved in things is definitely the way to go with education and training. The previous photo was showing people like out in the field, in the natural environment doing their work. This one is in the classroom, and of course, wherever we can, we're doing our absolute best, hands-on and out of the classroom, like as much as possible. That was one of the messages that came through on Thursday as well, was that, the classroom context doesn't work for all learners. And it's really important to, again, this being a two-way street. If you want your program to work well, if you want some good results, you can't just kind of impose a southern way of learning on northern communities. And, so really listening about, well, how does that work? And we often hear and are told, and then we see the results of following the advice to get out into the field, go to the lakes and streams, go and think about education and training in a different way, and listen to the local partners and how they want to work. It makes a really big difference. So that is the school programming really in a nutshell. I'd like to talk about the role of donors as well. Together these three areas, they comprise how we engage with Indigenous communities to address water challenges through education, training, and meaningful collaboration. That's really the main game for us. The role of donors is absolutely critical in doing that. An example can be, actually all three program areas, but we're seeing for the first time ever, it was about a year ago we started to see this in our numbers, right? I do some of our support, our financial management practices, and we actually saw the support from donors starting to outweigh the support from government. And that was really, really cool to see. It has profound impacts on our programming. And The reason for that is we are able to do what we do, how we do it, by almost exclusively listening to the Indigenous community partners and their preferences on how to do things. There's a lot of merit, and we've had a lot of good success with working through government funds. There'll always be a seat at the table for government funders. And at the same time, there can be some challenges at times when we're working together, because we work very much outside of the box, and sometimes government funding mechanisms they're designed to sort of put you back into the box in a way, you know, and for good reason. They do need to roll out their programs right across the country and kind of, you know, treat a lot of organizations the same way. And we just recognize, again, that when we're engaging with our community partners, we want to do it really uniquely. We want to be able to customize it to the unique needs there. The timing can also then be really critical. Like with the drinking water internship, we had a very successful partnership on Manitoulin with 7 First Nations. It was identifying what a lot of our community partners would say was like an absolute crisis in a number of communities. We had these wonderful successes in partnership, and then we watched that program sit on a shelf for 18 months. We had the next tribal council lined up that was interested to host. They were experiencing challenges that this program was designed to address, and we had to wait for 18 months for the funding to do it again. So the role of donors in our work is that we're then able to prevent programs from sitting on a shelf while we wait for, you know, those government kind of mechanisms to run, and we can roll out the program when the communities are ready and when we're ready. And instead of having to wait, you know, a long period of time for some of these things to line up. So the role of donors has been just absolutely critical. We've seen a very significant expansion over the last few years in particular. And, you know, so while we started in Ontario, and then I mentioned, yes, we're also working in Quebec and Labrador, Manitoba. The phone is ringing now literally from coast to coast to coast. It does appear to be that we're still in a fairly uncrowded space. Why there aren't more NGOs and charities and nonprofits working with Indigenous communities in this space, I don't know. I can only speak for Water First. But it's still an uncrowded space, so there's a lot of interest from Indigenous communities in the kind of work that we're doing. And so, like, no kidding, we're receiving phone calls from Indigenous community reps in British Columbia, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Saskatchewan, the Maritimes, and so on. So we're doing our best to not be overwhelmed by the kind of growth and interest. We're also seeing a lot of resources come through the door, and we're really trying to grow intentionally and carefully. We don't want to lose that kind of small shop feel that we have that I think has a lot to do with the outcomes, where, again, it's this two-way street. It's not us kind of coming in with a cookie cutter and just like, here's what we did last time, we're going to do the exact same thing here with this community. There are over 630 Indigenous communities in Canada, and they all need their sort of special approach and adaptations. So that's kind of where we're headed, is we want to be able to say yes. We want to be able to work with any Indigenous community in Canada who sees value in our programs. And, you know, kind of bit by bit, we are incrementally getting there. There's a lot of hiring to come up, and we really want to see some more people join the team. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. I talk about Water First for a living. I could talk all day about it, as you may be able to tell. But you know, those are the keys to what we're doing and how we do it. And you know, I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments that you may have. But as I said before, it was in, you know, some of these moments where I'm speaking publicly, and when we were only working in Uganda, when a lot of individuals started saying, well, you know, I do a speech to a Rotary Club, and some smart Canadians in the crowd would say, well, okay, it sounds like, you know, what you're doing in Uganda makes a lot of sense, and those people really need the help, but why are you going all the way to Uganda to find water challenges to solve? You can drive up north, you know, an hour and drive through an Indigenous community that doesn't have safe, clean drinking water. Why are you going all that way? And it was through these experiences where some of those questions were posed, and they helped to really steer this organization. So again, I welcome any questions or comments that you may have. No pressure either. Well, and that's fine too. I'll be around for a little bit afterward, and of course I've left some materials out on the table. You're more than welcome to take a sheet of paper home that says a bit about how we do what we do. There's contact information there if anything comes up. All right? Okay.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you very much. Jordan and I have attended some of their annual updates with different donors and so on, and they usually put on a very impressive evening of bringing in Indigenous artists and others who are experts in their fields, and just letting everybody experience the other culture as well as what Water First is doing. And you've just got the best way of doing it, just working with the people. So thank you so much. So our final song for today is, it's truly a hymn. And it's sung by Indigenous women who are the traditional keepers of the water. I think there's a part, if it's the one I'm thinking of, where you can also sing the chorus.
Granddaughter, the water can hear you. The water has memory.
Nibi,
Nibi,
Wapa,
Waba,
Endayan,
Endayan.
Nibi wabo endayen, aki mismi. Nibi wabo, heya heya, heya hey, heya heya, heya ho.
Water is the life's blood of our mother, the earth. Water is the lifeblood of our own body.
Nibi wabo endayen, aki mismi. Nibi wabo, heya heya, heya hey, heya heya, heya ho.
To continue to pass on the knowledge that needs to be given unto the other generations. You are the keeper of the water.
Nibi wabo endayen, aki mismi. Nibi wabo, heya heya, heya hey, heya heya, heya ho.
To make the change in this life condition that we're in, that great-grandchildren will stand up to this truth of what life is about, and to live it in such an honorable way, the way ancestors came to this earth.
Nibi wabo endayen, aki mismi. Nibi wabo, heya heya, heya hey, heya heya, heya ho.
Each day when the sun rises, no matter how bad the day before might have been, There's a new chance for your hopes and dreams. And I say, Chimiigwech, thank you for singing the water song.
Nibi wabo endayen aki miskwi nibi wabo heya 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 hey heya 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 ho.
Sorry, need my eyes. Let us pray. God, we thank you for the blessings we've experienced here in this time together. We thank you and bless you for John and his staff at Water First, who were able to see and learn about the water tragedies in our own country, and then combine their knowledge with the ages-old knowledge of your Indigenous peoples to do something about it. They have opened our eyes to see the needs in the First Nations around us and showed us a tangible way to help to reconcile some of the unimaginable situations that they live with every day. Help us to understand and then act on the inequities of this water challenge that surrounds us all. We pray, Lord, for those on both our west and east coasts today, Lord. They have an overabundance of water and lots of damage. The climate catastrophes around the world this year are hitting closer and closer to home. But we know, Lord, that when people face calamity, Lord, they turn to you. Bless them. Help us to share and show our love to them through you. We ask forgiveness for needing coaching to know how to do something to help our brethren, and then to share that knowledge with those around us. Blessed are you, O God, who rules with majesty, glory, and truth in our hearts and in the world. In the law and in the prophets, you've given us your will for creation in our lives. And in Jesus Christ, you have revealed the depth of your love for us. And in him, your kingdom comes near. As we wait for the birth of the Prince of Peace, our Lord and Messiah, you call us into relationships of care, not control, into service of one another, not supremacy over each other, into the power of love, not the love of power. Remind us again, Lord, that we conform to the life of your Son when we show wisdom by trusting, we respond to offenders by forgiving, we handle money by sharing, we contend with our enemies by loving, we handle leadership by serving, and we handle power gently. Open our minds to the meaning and power of your incarnation, and let us see your grace at work in the world around us. Holy and righteous God, we offer our gifts with humble hearts, knowing the need in your world is great, and our gifts alone will never fill that need. We offer our gifts today in hope that you will bless them and multiply them and use them to help fulfill your purpose revealed in Jesus Christ, Savior of us all. Thank you, Lord, for touching our lives in ways we cannot explain. You have taken us to your realms of glory, and we want to say thank you. And as we depart now to our homes and various other destinations, we ask that you continue to be with us, Lord, and love us, and guide us in understanding our fellow Canadians, to make us signs of hope in the world that you created and love. In Jesus' name, on this first Sunday of Advent, we pray and hope and believe. Amen. May the good Lord bless and keep you, whether near or far away. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you and give you peace. Amen. And all God's people shouted, Amen.
Thank you.